Right, our end of year report for natural environment and water quality targeted rates. I think we've got Rachel Kelleher and Craig McElroy will present the presentation, and once again this presentation is on Nexus, and the full reports are on the agenda.
Kia ora tātou. It's Rachel Kelleher, General Manager, Environmental Services here. I'm going to start the presentation. I'm just going to see if I can get it up on my screen. Hopefully you can see that now. Just checking that you can see that.
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
we can.
See it.
Thank you.
We can just see the whole screen. So if you want to make it into a slideshow.
How was that?
It's dark for me. It's just black. Maybe move the. I'm not sure if anyone else can see it, but if you can move the slides forward and back, that might work.
Can't see anything, sorry, Chair.
Yeah, so maybe just go back to the other screen and we can look at our ones on Nexus if we can't see the detail.
Okay.
Yeah,
Apologies
so we
for
can.
that.
Yeah, we can see the slideshow, and it's just not zoomed in, but that's fine.
Okay. All right, so today myself and Craig McElroy, General Manager for Healthy Waters, are going to just share some of the achievements delivered through both the Natural Environment Targeted Rate and the Water Quality Targeted Rate over 2020 and 2021. The Natural Environment Targeted Rate, as you'll be aware, was introduced in 2018, and for the Natural Environment Targeted Rate we have 311 million over 10 years, plus an additional 107 million from the extension in the 2021 and 2031 LTP process. And while we draw approximately 31 million each year, the planned budget does vary from year to year based on the program needs. So some years we do have bigger needs, for example, large-scale pest control operations over and above the existing work, which does require sort of peaks and troughs from a budget perspective. So the targeted rate program is delivered by Environmental Services, but in partnership with other parts of Council. So we work very closely in a co-delivery model with community facilities on things like Kodi dieback and the program to expand our animal and pest plant control in local parks. We work closely with regional parks, equally on those types of programs along with Kodi dieback, REMU, and also our compliance teams as well. There's 5 main programs, so the plant pathogen program, our mainland integrated site program, our islands and marine, expanding community action, and enabling tools. So just some of the highlights over the past year. You'll see there's been a big focus both from a CapEx and OpEx perspective on bringing a number of tracks right across the region up to a Kodi safe standard, so both in regional parks and local parks. And despite some significant disruption through COVID, we were able to achieve 33.6 kilometres across regional parks and almost 9.5 kilometres of track upgrades in local parks, and installed over 31 hygiene stations across both the regional and local park network. One of the exciting things that we were able to achieve this past year was also to leverage from our current program additional funding through Jobs for Nature central government funding to support job creation focused on additional track work that will complement the Natural Environment Targeted Rate work. We delivered over 80,000 hectares of pest animal control across the region, and feral pigs on Waiheke and Argentine ants on Aotea are now tracking towards eradication status. So some really great progress made for those programs. One of the things that we were able to establish through the targeted rate was a pilot for a contestable grant called the Community Coordination and Facilitation Grant. And that's a grant that is really focused on enabling community groups doing conservation activity to engage or employ additional support to help them with the facilitation and coordination running costs of their projects. So we were able to support 44 projects. That was 35 new projects and 9 projects that were receiving multi-year funding. And we've just ticked over 1 year of having the Te Aki Tamaki Makaurau conservation portal up and running. So it's the website that we've set up to basically hold a range of information about the conservation estate in Auckland, to provide best practice guidance on a whole raft of different activities that groups might be carrying out, to give information about where things are happening so that groups can connect. So it's really very much a one-stop shop for both our organisation but also communities wanting to know more about what's happening for conservation in Auckland, and to know more about how they can help. Not on this slide, but definitely worth a mention too, was that we've really ramped up our ability to do more in checking and managing the biosecurity risk to our islands. So we carried out over 446 inspections of ferries, and over 200 high-risk loads of material going across to islands were checked with our biosecurity dog team to make sure that they weren't taking nasty travellers or passengers across to our pest-free islands. And a world-leading first was the certification of the first 2 Cody dieback detection dogs, which we'll be working with into the future to help with the quicker diagnostic of Cody dieback presence. So really looking at different ways that we can deliver our work more quickly, more efficiently, and sort of demonstrating best practice. So just a little bit, just to show you just the budget spend for last year. We were slightly behind the planned spend. The budget for the 2021 year was set ahead of COVID coming into the country, so that did cause some impacts for us, both in terms of contractor availability, pause of work, but also the council or the organisation taking a careful approach to managing its staff recruitment through that period as well. One of the other things too that's been a factor in the spend for last year was that some of our partners that we work closely with, the timing for their ability to be able to fund or co-fund projects that we're working on together has changed, and so we have pushed some projects that were planned to start last year out slightly to enable us to partner with organisations also impacted by COVID. And some of that work has had some additional benefit, not just the Jobs for Nature funding, but we've been able to leverage some additional funding through Predator Free 2050, which is going to be supporting our eradication of pests off Kowal Island. So some good reasons to defer work for that past year, which is going to see some increased outcomes and benefits for council as we move forwards. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Craig, and Craig, if you just let me know when you want me to move through the slides.
Yeah, kia ora, Rachel, and good morning, Mr. Chair and councillors. Lovely to be with you this morning. Just want to introduce the water quality targeted rate, and first of all to highlight or remind you of the fact we've got 5 program areas which are highlighted on the screen, so I won't read those out. What I would like to say is that the rates was introduced in 2018, started off at $452 million. Now, with the increase through the LTP process, we're now looking at an additional $218 million, giving us a total of $670 million from 2021 to 2031. I'd also like to acknowledge the great collaboration that's occurring with Watercare in relation to the Western Isthmus program, and also the collaboration with the Regulatory Department around both the closing the gap or our contaminant reduction program on the on-site wastewater system compliance. And obviously we were somewhat impacted last year by COVID-19, but I think overall we achieved a great set of outcomes. Next slide, please, Rachel. So just getting down to a little bit more detail, in respect to the Western Isthmus and the improvement program, big outcomes for the year were the St Mary's Bay stormwater tunnel and marine outfall, the commissioning of that work. Also the Kahu Bay and Freeman's Bay stormwater separation project. So if you look at the communities impacted by those three project areas, that's another more than 3,700 properties that are benefiting from that upgraded network, and obviously the marine environment is also benefiting from those improvement projects. Also a big focus on stormwater catchments with respect to safe networks, so 190 hectares of inspections, and that's delivered a massive benefit to those specific areas. Also like to highlight the work we've done on the on-site wastewater area. So at the moment Council has some 12,000 records, and there's still 28,000 systems that don't have a record, and our plan is going forward that those systems will be in place, and it'll probably take us about 2.5 years to have all 40,000 recorded. But of the 12,000 records, we were able to work through the detail of 6,000 records in the last year, and you'll be interested to know that of those 6,000 there are 500 follow-ups underway. So roughly 8% of those systems that were subject to inspection have required additional work to be done. Also, we made great progress last year with the Tuanayute trial, and what we are working with iwi at the moment is how we can grow the program for this year. I'd have to say that's been a little bit frustrated by COVID and some of the practical issues of getting those new teams up and running, but it's certainly our intention to grow Tuanayute substantially this year, and I'd like to think by the middle of the year we'll have up to 12 Tuanayute teams in place. And also, as I indicated, also we've done a lot of work around the sediment program as well. As you're aware that sediment is a major issue for us, and with the support of Regulatory we were able to do nearly 6,000 site visits at building sites, and interestingly enough quite a significant number of infringements were picked up as a consequence of that work, with nearly 740 infringement notices. So there's no doubt about it that the resources, both the human and the financial resources that have been put into these areas of inspection, is actually proving to be very fruitful. Next slide please, Rachel. So on the budget side of things, despite the problems with COVID, we still managed to over-deliver against our budget. So we had a budget of $39 million a year, with an actual performance for the year of $45 million, which was a very pleasing result. Next slide please, Rachel. And something that we did this year for the first time, which I think has been highly successful, is every local board in the region has had a snapshot of the performance in relation to both the environmental targeted rate and the water quality targeted rate. And so that stat shot is something that we will be doing annually from now on, and I think we're more than happy to make all of those snapshots available for all of the councillors to understand, not only within their own local area, but what's been achieved across the region. I think one of the great benefits of the program and the increased resourcing is that we've now got proactive programs occurring in every local board area in Tamaki Makaurau. Next slide, Rachel, which is actually the last slide, which is just the open invitation for Rachel and myself to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Craig. Amazing work as per usual for you and your teams. Just phenomenal the increase you've managed to get out happening in the community over the last couple of years, and including last year. Right, so Councillor Cooper and will move. Oh, right, you've already got that there, and Deputy Chair Pippacoon will second. And now we'll go to some questions. Councillor Walker has question first.
Got a few questions just around the and first of all commendations just around the pest stuff, and I'm looking particularly at the possum trapping and the like. From a carbon retention point of view, that kind of pest management generates phenomenal results. Is it possible to have any reporting on that? I mean, even just rough estimate stuff would be useful, because if you control possums, you retain a lot of carbon, far more so than what you would otherwise. So just a quick question there to start with.
And I think that's a very good question. Thank you, Councillor Walker. Certainly it's something that we could look at in terms of giving you some estimates of the benefits that we see through preventing the loss of vegetation through controlling possums. You know, there would probably be a degree of coarseness around that, but we understand generally what level of consumption possums carry out across forest environments, and through the control we could come up with some sort of rough calculation of how that benefits that carbon picture. So happy to have a look at that for you.
Okay, if you could get back to me on that, that'd be great. The other question I've got is for Craig, and it just goes to sedimentation. I recently saw a presentation that Jeff Reed gave to the Environmental Defence Society around sedimentation around New Zealand, including Auckland, and it was just devastating, especially from clean fills, a number of which are within the Albany ward and Rodney. It's of huge concern that there are large ongoing flows of sediment leaving those areas that appear to be not always well monitored. Any comment on what we're doing in that space, Craig?
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Look, we're doing the absolute best we can with the current level of resources to be as proactive as possible, but it's an area where if we had additional resourcing, we'd obviously be able to do more. But right now, we're doing all we can with the existing resources. It's a real battle, as you're aware, and I think it's an area that we've already had previous conversations around the need to put more stringent plans in place around putting a lot more focus on the developers taking direct accountability for these issues. It's certainly an ongoing challenge for us.
Just in that respect, are you feeding into the process that we had reported to us yesterday around the monitoring evaluation of the unitary plan?
Most definitely, we're very heavily engaged in that process, as you can imagine.
And the other just broad question I've got is it's really good to have reporting and obviously having some numbers. Having said that, it would be really helpful if those numbers were within the larger context. For example, you can report on streams and generate a number. If that is within the context of the number of or the kilometres of streams within Auckland, it's more relevant. Same with on-site wastewater, obviously, great work there, but we really need that contextual picture, that is the visits and the like relative to the total number that we need to address. So is it possible to have any contextual information so that we're reporting against the bigger picture?
Yeah, look, I think you raise a real valid point there, and that's something I'll certainly take back to the teams, and we'll have a talked to them about it, and that was the reason why I wanted to highlight with the on-site systems, for example, the fact that although we did 6,000 inspection records this year, that still leaves 34,000 to go out of our grand total of 40,000. That's why I also highlighted the fact I think it's going to take us a good 2.5 years to get through that whole schedule of properties, but at least we're making good progress.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. And the suggestion or question I'm putting applies equally to Rachel across the area that obviously you're over. Is it possible to have some contextual reporting in the future?
Certainly, that's something that we can also look at for a number of our programs, and there is some information that may provide you some of that context in the attachment in the report, which is part of our operational reporting that we're required to do for the Regional Pest Management Plan, but we can certainly look at that as well.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Right. Councillor Darby, you have a question?
Oh, thanks, Chair. Thanks all. Look, the budgets here have been, thankfully, substantially increased, and they've come off a pretty low base. And when you increase budgets like this, there's always a risk of poor quality spend, lack of tracking and auditing and that sort of thing. So, Rachel, Craig, could you give us an idea of what systems are in place in your respective units to ensure there's good auditing of the spend, to ensure, the expected outcomes for the dollar spend are delivered, and there's ongoing checking to ensure that we are getting the very best outcomes, the expected outcomes for every dollar that's spent, and there is a keen eye on making sure there's no poor quality spend that turns up from these quite significant budgets.
I'm happy to kick off, Councillor Darby, then I'll hand over to Rachel. Look, we pride ourselves in Healthy Waters that we have a very open and transparent approach to all of our projects. All of our projects have really good quality assurance attached to them. We bring in independent advisory teams to help us with a number of our program areas, and we are determined to be fully accountable for the community for every dollar that we spend. We're extremely open and honest with our community groups. We share information, and I can assure you that we have got absolutely nothing to hide, and we do our utmost to ensure the best use of our dollars. Over to you, Rachel.
So can I just come in there before we go to Rachel? So post-project, are there post-project audits? Are there good back office systems like that? It's not just about transparency, I hear that, but are there post-project audits to ensure that the deliverables that were expected have been delivered and there is good, ongoing value for money? And Craig, I'm not wanting to sound like the eternal cost accountant here. I know that at some stage, there are going to be eyes on this budget, to the degree that maybe they haven't been to date, to make sure that the spend is really delivering what was expected. So I'm looking for, auditing processes. Has your finance team, has that been beefed up to ensure that the operational team has got that, that finance back office support, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so on our whole capital delivery, we have a full gateway process that goes all the way from conception through to commissioning and handover. And part of that process is a full closeout report done on all significant investments. And would be very happy if it was appropriate to share that information with you, Councillor Darby, so you can see the thoroughness that's associated with making sure that at the end of the day we deliver the outcomes that we say we were going to deliver, and we're held accountable for delivering those outcomes. I'd also like to make the observation is if we're going to, with what Three Waters reform is occurring, irrespective of the number of entities, I think there's a general acknowledgement there is going to be independent economic regulation, and part of that economic regulation we're putting major focus on delivering outcomes as promised to communities. So in many ways what we're doing now is just getting ready for a future regulatory environment anyway. Over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Craig. And there's probably not a lot more to add to what Craig's already covered because we follow a similar approach. But what I would say is that for the natural environment targeted rate, you know, we've got a high level of portfolio, program and project management discipline that we're applying to that, to the spending of those funds. And like Craig says, that follows the investment development framework that Council has adopted. All of our projects have got a strategic assessments which are documented. We've got our investment documentation, KPIs, a little bit different, some of our work in that we don't sort of naturally have the closeout perhaps that Craig does for some of his projects because the nature of plant and animal pest control is that it's ongoing, but we've got clear milestones, KPIs that we're measuring our progress against, and of course we've also got commitments that we've made to the public through things like the regional pest management plan, of which the targeted rate is helping to deliver. One of the new things that we've done this year actually is greater investment in training our staff. So not all of our staff are project managers, but most of our staff are responsible for delivering some element of a project. And so we've been putting a greater emphasis into upskilling and training our staff to understand the requirements of good project management, and that's something that we'll be taking forwards on an ongoing basis.
Oh, thank you. Look, that's good to hear. I appreciate that from Rachel and Craig. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. We have Councillor Watson with a question next.
Yeah, more by way of a comment. Just further to that notion of accountability, Craig and Rachel, just expression of support for that local reporting mechanism that has been introduced via the local boards. I think that's been really good and really important, given that everyone's paying these targeted rates, and one of the obvious questions that we get as councillors is well, what are we getting for it? So I've certainly appreciated that kind of local board breakdown of what's going on with the various rates, and I think that's really important to continue. So thank you for that. And just finally, just to reinforce the notion that Councillor Walker mentioned in terms of that presentation on sedimentation. I know it's a problem region-wide, but in some areas it's particularly evident and has been for quite some time. So certainly, Craig, would appreciate identification of what sort of resource might be required there, because that is an ongoing concern that has been around all parts of council for quite a while. And given the sort of good work that's being done elsewhere, it'd be useful if you were enabled to continue that in an area that is really important on a whole number of levels. So thanks for that.
No, thank you, Councillor Watson. I'm happy to do that. And I'd also want to point out that with the new water regulator, Te Mata Arawai, that's been set up by the Crown, although their focus on day one is drinking water quality, they've also been tasked to look at stormwater and wastewater issues as well. So I'm very confident that the question of sedimentation is going to come up as part of that stormwater conversation.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Councillor. And also keep in mind that there are other budgets that do also cover that work, as this is only what is presented is only covering what's funded by the targeted rates. There are other budgets as well. The next member Wilson.
Kia ora. Thank you all. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you,
Craig for the presentation. How you can do that with such a wide remit is beyond me, but thank you. I agree absolutely to try and cut my kōrero down with Councillor Walker, Darby and Watson in terms of specificity in an area, for instance, if it was south, and specifically for iwi Māori. I heard you say, Craig, the Two in a Ute project, and seemed to be the only one that was referenced. Be really good to see how that's working, even in a financial / Māori way. Is that working or is it not? That would be my interest, the financial and social outcomes. So maybe I'll coach this more as a, because it's an information only paper, as more commentary, just to see how we can tease that out a bit more, and specifically around improving and restoring Te Mauri o Te Taiao and Te Mauri o Te Wai. Is there some work that's going to be done there, and some cultural monitoring performance measures? Will they be included in the future?
Kia ora, Karen. Yeah, I can give you absolute assurance that we're committed to improving our working and reporting back to iwi Māori in this space, and perhaps I'm happy to share with you offline a lot more of the detail that we're doing in this space, because I can assure you it's an area that we're extremely active in at the moment.
Kia ora, we just got a bit spoilt in the previous presentation where there was a whole section on it, but happy to do that offline. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Wilson. Councillor Fletcher, did you want to speak, or are you happy just for me to read out your comment? I can't hear Councillor Fletcher, so I'll just say that Councillor Fletcher said she didn't need a question or speak, but just want to commend Rachel on the outstanding work she's undertaking. Cool. Councillor Coombe, Pātai.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair. Kia ora koutou. Thank you to everyone who's worked on this kaupapa. It is looking very impressive, and it's great to see how the targeted rate is achieving results in a very directed way. So that's all good news. And I know the snapshots are very useful for the local boards, and it's great to see that highlighted. My pātai is really just looking ahead on how we're going to make this information more public facing. I think some of the questions have already touched on this, but is there can we just talk through the very specific steps around the comms and how we're actually going to share a lot of this good news and great work?
I can pick this one up to start with, Craig, and then hand to you perhaps. So we have annually done an annual report that's been made public on our targeted rate progress, and so we'll be looking to do the same. We also have our Auckland story that will go out after today, which will provide information summarising the highlights from the past year as part of that telling the story. I would agree that it's something that we need to keep working on, and part of our program moving forwards is to build some additional ability for sharing more of the work that we're doing out externally, and so we've got plans afoot for that, with some of the deferred resource that we had expected to have on board last year coming on board shortly to provide some support for that. Craig, do you want to add anything to that?
Oh, just echoing Rachel's points around our Auckland story that's coming out following today's meeting, but also so that we try to take the advantage of all of our project activity to celebrate milestones and ensure we get good media coverage as our projects travel through their life cycle. So it's an area that we put a lot of effort into ensuring we get maximum publicity around our projects, and I think it's an area that because of the nature of a lot of the work we do, we've been pretty successful. And also there's obviously massive stakeholder engagement and involvement and community involvement in just about all of our projects.
I think that's a really good point from Craig, and just that, we do take a very proactive approach of sharing the work that we're doing throughout the course of the year. We've got interesting work, and a good example of that would be some of the track reopenings we've done, but also the work that we've done with our Cody dieback detection dogs, which actually made the story that we did on that, made it sort of internationally, and I think had some of the widest ranging reach of any media comms that we've put out. So, we're definitely doing all we can to get visibility of the project as we're delivering them, as well as at the end of the year too.
Thank you. Appreciate that work, and also just the level of detail and getting the information out to local groups. I know who've particularly across all of this work, but especially around water quality and just the concerns that the work's been held up. But actually, a lot of it is progressing, and it's not for the lack of budget. There's a whole lot of factors. So just getting all of that information out there. And I just raised that because I just had responded to a query about what was happening with the Newmarket Gully wastewater project, as one example. I just wanted to, I don't need to comment further, Mr. Chair, but just to, very happy to be seconding this item and to thank everybody for outstanding work. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Deputy Chair Coombe, thank you. Partai from Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll quickly preface so I don't have to make a comment later. I just want to say, in front of us we have two outstanding leaders with fantastic teams behind them, and I'm so proud of the work that the two of you do. Thank you. And the way you, Rachel and Craig particularly, work with us over the last year, Shane and I, in our area, our big Kari dieback infected area. So my question is around, I think the Mayor would have received a letter from Chris Ballantyne from Rivercare Te Waiō Parera group from Te Atatu Peninsula, who have the mammoth task of, as a community group, they've taken on wanting to look after that creek and waterway, extensive catchment that goes into that, which I'm looking out on in the moment. But what I suppose for me is this difficulty when we have water care and healthy water roles crossing over, and when we have, for example, water care do have the Northern Interceptor project, which will ease the sewage overflows to that area. But how do we communicate to that community what we're going to be doing in that area? There's a monitoring program going in there, but actually doing the work, because there's significant overflows there, which is contributed to by the stormwater, but it effectively is because we've just got massive catchments of Hobsonville Point, West Harbour, a whole lot of new growth going over the waterway into Te Atatu. How do we communicate and kind of help that community do the job they want to do and show them the pathway to cleaning up that waterway and what our role is in there? Sorry, it's a long question, but it is a big subject for us.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Councillor Cooper. What I can say from the outset is that the working relationship we now have with water care is the best that it's ever been, and going forward we are determined to work so that from a public point of view it's dealing effectively with the one organisation. And you're absolutely correct that until we get the wastewater and the stormwater systems working in synergy, we're not going to achieve the outcomes that we need. So we do now have joint planning teams that have been established to make sure that we get the right infrastructural solutions, and I think Healthy Waters is the part of the council group that's happiest to take the lead and make sure that the water care team become involved in these community projects as well. But definitely please point any community groups in the direction of Healthy Waters, and particularly Adam Shellhammer, who heads up our community group within Healthy Waters, would be delighted to work with local communities in this space.
Have a community meeting, thank you, but I'm sure that'll give some good information for the Mayor to respond to the letter from the community. Thank you, Craig and Rachel.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Kia ora, Councillor Cooper. Comment from Councillor Simpson. We'll just go into comments. If there are any more questions, I'm happy to take them from someone who hasn't had a question, but we'll just go straight into comments now. Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I want to add my thanks to Rachel and Craig. You've both done an exemplary job. You've got fantastic teams. And Craig, to you especially, any time I have needed you, you've been there. So I just want to do a big shout out to both of you and your willingness to engage with us. I want to touch on, I think if you had anyone wanting to move or second this, Richard, you'd probably have 21 people wanting to move it and 21 people wanting to second it. I just want to make a couple of comments, though, around the transparency of targeted rates. There is more transparency around a targeted rate than a general rate. The audit process that we use for reporting on the spend on a targeted rate is pretty good, and I'm more than happy to do a memo or something to even highlight that if any councillors are concerned around that. But they really are. That's the advantage of a targeted rate. It is targeted for the spend and the project, exactly what the money has been put aside for. I also just want to touch on the fact that as councillors, we go through the angst of setting rates. And when it comes to selling the good news of the outcome of that rates in the areas which we are voted from, it's really nice if we can be part of that. The benefit, of course, is in every local board area, but the decision to rate or not to rate and the amount of that rate is made around this table. And so I just emphasise the fact that I think that as councillors, this is a mayoral thing across the region, but as councillors, I think, we really need a role in that comms locally. We've done a lot in the finance team about getting out to every councillor and local board as to what projects and the spend that has occurred in the area. We did that quite a lot as part of the LTP and, of course, the emergency budget as well. So those are just my comments. It's fantastic work, and I think it's really working out to be a great outcome for Auckland. So, Mr. Chair, thank you, and to Craig and Rachel, a huge thanks to you and the team.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Great points and very very important points. So thank you, Mayor Goff.
Yeah. Thanks. And, I want to follow on from what Desley has said. First of all, to thank staff, to Rachel and Craig and all of their teams for a fantastic effort. And this is a paper where we can celebrate things that are being done to protect and enhance the environment. But I also want to put out a thanks to councillors, because 3 years ago, when I put up the two targeted rates to enhance the environment, it did take courage on the part of those that supported those rates. And that courage, I think, was then reflected in 2-1, the public of Auckland in the submissions and in our polling, saying yes, they supported it. And they supported it because of, I think, one of the reasons that Desley has raised, that transparency. They didn't mind. In fact, 2-1, they supported paying more rates for ends that they thought that would be good for the city that they lived in and their kids would grow up in. And, maybe there's a lesson in that in regard to climate change as well. But there are two specific things that I want to acknowledge. First of all, St Mary's Bay, Craig. I wasn't much impressed when the community said that they didn't want us to do it in this way or that way. But the investment we've made has cut by 80% the wastewater overflows into our harbours in the heart of the city, and that's been fantastic. The second thing is about sedimentation that a couple of other councillors have already mentioned, but councillors might have noticed in the Herald this morning quite a big article by Anne Gibson. A couple of years ago, I went out with the Closing the Gaps team and looked at some of the building sites around the city, and it was bloody appalling. The sites weren't well organised. There was, you could just see the sediment running into the drains and out into the creeks and therefore into the harbours. And in the last year, we've done something like 6,000 inspections. And Craig, I want to thank the teams that are out there doing that work. And that resulted in something like 739 infringement notices being issued. And a rare positive thing in the Herald this morning saying, yeah, council said they were going to do this, and now they're doing it. And a minister and the Environmental Protection Agency and others praising the council for getting out there and walking the talk. So there's a lot to celebrate in these. And, once again, a big thanks to those councillors that supported my targeted rates back in 2018, and for the staff that have turned our decision into a reality of a better environment for Auckland. Thank you very much.
Kia ora, thank you, Mayor Goff. Councillor Stewart says she doesn't need to speak, but wants to thank Craig and his team for all they do, especially around the Angelo catchment. So thank you, Councillor Stewart. Was there anyone else who would like to speak to the item?
Richard, do you think you should get Rachel to talk to her point in the sidebar?
Yeah, no, that'd be good. Rachel, did you just want to mention the further work on the comms?
Oh, yes, thank you. And I should have mentioned it before, but we do also have a rates insert going out on the targeted rates in November. So that's just an additional piece of work we're doing to share what we are achieving through the natural environment targeted rates across Auckland with our Aucklanders.
Kia ora, thank you, Rachel. And I'm wondering if we could get the natural environment targeted rate and water quality targeted rates, those kind of infographics maybe sent out to councillors as JPEGs or something. That would be a helpful way to get some of those quick data out there. I mean, I know we can screenshot it from our own computers, but that could be helpful too for social media. I just want to say, yeah, congratulations again to the team, both teams, all teams, and also to the community who've been backing up a lot of this work too. A lot of this work has enabled significant increases in volunteers and community organisations and communities, local boards, mana whenua, whoever wants to be involved with these environmental projects. This money has also enabled that, and that dollar, that spend, that ratepayer dollar has gone a lot further because of the ability to have a place and a way to engage and also work in a coordinated way across Tamaki Makaurau. So I just want to highlight some of the things. 33 kilometres of tracks reopened, which is phenomenal. And that's in the regional parks, almost 10 kilometres in the local parks as well. 80,000 hectares of pest animal control delivered across the region. Those numbers are astonishing. 1,500 properties were visited to inspect private drain connections. That is methodical, complicated work, and the teams doing that have been amazing. Almost 80,000 trees planted as part of the program. Almost 6,000 inspections conducted on construction sites. It's just significant work, and it's fantastic that through the 10-year budget we've also been able to continue this work for another 3 years on top of the 10 we had already planned to do. So this isn't everything, and it's important that when we talk about this with our communities, this is the sort of big icing on top of the cake of what we're doing in the water quality and environment space, because there were and there is a lot of other parts of the budget and council that is doing this work. This is hundreds of millions of dollars of additional work that we know is so important to biodiversity, water quality, and as the Mayor said, community who submitted on these rates, were very much in favour of this. So I think, it's just another fantastic show of what we've supported, but also what the community wanted and demanded of us. And you know, we're stepping up, but we always know we can do more, especially in this changing climate. So thank you very much. I will put it to the vote. Councillor Cooper and Councillor Coombe have moved and seconded. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? No. Perfect. That is carried. Now, I know we've only got 2 small items to go, but if we have a 5-minute break, especially for staff, so they're not tethered to their computers, just have a 5-minute